Well, I've known Jim Allen for a long time, and Jim knows that I've been a sailor forever, and Jim knows I love to sail, so gave me a call and asked me if I'd like to join.
And you grew up sailing here on the Great Lakes, correct?
Yes, yes. In fact, people ask me how I know how to sail, and I said, how do you know how to walk and talk? I knew how to sail before I could walk and talk, as far as I know. I mean, I've been sailing my whole life.
And your father was pretty instrumental man in the sailing industry, yeah?
Yes, my father was Ray Greene, and he built and manufactured the very first fiberglass boat, let alone sailboat. And in fact, when he was at college at Ohio State, he wanted to do his thesis on the feasibility of large objects out of fiberglass, and his professor said, not possible. And approximately 30 years later, he apologized to him in a packed house of distinguished Ohio State alums and said, I'm sorry, you proved me wrong.
That must have been a nice moment.
Yeah.
So what type of sailboats have you sailed over the years?
Oh, over my sailing career, everything from a 10-foot Vixen up to a Morgan 1-ton and Jim's 40-footer.
And what would you say has been your favorite sailboat to sail?
Oh, wow. They're all so different. There are times that I love to go out in a 10-foot dinghy, and there are times that I love to be on a 40-footer. It just depends on the situation, I guess.
What sort of situation would warrant a dinghy being your favorite boat?
Just going out and having a fun of afternoon sailing. I love to teach kids in smaller boats like dinghies, as long as they've got a main and a jib, because the kids really get a feel for what sailing is like. And I like teaching kids how to flip a boat and also how to ride it. And I used to teach them in 10-foot Vixens, which was another boat my father manufactured. So.
And you grew up sailing on the Great Lakes.
Mm-hmm.
You have experience beyond the lakes, though, right?
Yes, I have sailed in both the Pacific and the Atlantic, and also down in Florida and the Gulf. But I would say that if you can sail the Great Lakes, you can sail anywhere.
Why would you say that?
Well, Lake Erie is the shallowest lake, and that's where I got a good deal of my experience when I was growing up. And a storm on Lake Erie can pop up in minutes, very short time. And I've also sailed on Lake Michigan, and right here in West Grand Traverse Bay, I've done a lot of sailing. And you learn a lot more than if you're on an ocean and you have a lot of experience to take when you go on an ocean sailing.
And what's the furthest point you've sailed to?
As far as the farthest distance on one voyage?
Sure.
Oh boy. Probably Holland to Mackinac City. That would probably be the longest without even going into port.
How far is that?
Oh boy. I'd have to look on a map. It's been so long ago, I don't remember.
It's several hundred miles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd have to look. I don't even remember.
And what would you say was one of your most memorable experiences sailing?
Ooh, I have a couple. Racing in Lake Erie when I was about 16 years old on a 16-foot Rebel between just off of Middle Bass, north of South Bass, which is where Put-in Bay is. And I was in the senior race week, and a waterspout came up. And watched the waterspout come across the lake and just kind of sat there and did a lot of praying, but rode it out and did fine. That was one experience. Several years later, right here in West Grand Traverse Bay, and a tornado came across Leelanau Peninsula and turned into a waterspout coming across the bay, and we were anchored at what was then Marion Island, now Power Island, and decided to take the Morgan 1-ton into Bowers Harbor and had no canvas up whatsoever. The main was reefed on the boom. And going into Powers Island, we were on about a 45-degree keel with no canvas up, and the main was literally ripped right off the boom. And had my daughter at the time was a toddler, maybe 2-3 years old, and she and I were below, and my ex-husband was on the helm, and that was probably another most memorable experience.
That's pretty amazing to me because, my initial thought about sailing on the Great Lakes is, that'll be nice and calm and cool and relaxing.
Wrong.
So I've had a bit of that while I've been sailing out here, but what would you say the standard sailing experience would be out on the lake?
Oh, wow. You could, in the Great Lakes, you can have all kinds from no air, which we have had on this trip, to 20-mile-an-hour knots, which we had yesterday in West Grand Traverse Bay. I mean, you can have everything in between. You can have storms. You can, lots of stuff. The trip from Holland to Mackinac City, we were basically on a run practically the whole way and got into some heavy air, and the air almost took our dinghy, which was upside down on the davits on the stern. And that's when we had a 27-foot New Horizon and almost lost the dinghy because the wind caught up underneath the dinghy. And so that's, and the seas were, oh my gosh, 6-8 footers at least.
What would you say, if any, what are the differences between sailing now and sailing when you were younger? Like, I imagine there's a number of changes to boats and, different sailing techniques that are needed now compared to before.
Well, I'm not used to GPSs. I'm used to sitting down and charting and following charts and, things like that. And so GPS is like so foreign to me. And automatic pilots on sailboats is totally foreign to me. I mean, that's not sailing. That's, as far as I'm concerned, being a stink pot. I would much rather look at a compass and plot my course and go. I guess I'm old-fashioned.
There's nothing wrong with that. Do you have a boat currently?
Unfortunately, no. No, I'm taking care of my 86-year-old mother, and so right now that's the high priority. So this break has been wonderful. I've taught sailing to kids all the way up to adults, seniors. That was my first job, was teaching sailing.
When teaching, do you find it easier to teach younger people or elder? Who takes to sailing?
The kids. Usually the kids do. As long as they don't have that fear of the water in them. They are really fun to teach because they want to get wet and they want to tip over. And so that's probably the most fun. But then, like at the college level, when I taught when I was on the Kent State racing team, that was kind of fun too because there were people that were apprehensive, but yet once they got in it was like, yeah, this is fun.
So would you say a certain ability to face your fears is necessary to learn them? Stand up to your fears?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, even as an adult, there are certain fears that are in us that you almost have to go beyond. For instance, the experiences that I've had through water spouts and heavy winds and stuff, I seem to handle it better every time it happens. And I think everybody does as far as that goes. There isn't anything that I'm afraid of other than I've always feared that if I was going to go before my time, so to speak, that it would be by drowning. Falling overboard, hitting my head, getting caught in a riptide, I don't know, whatever. Of course, riptides we don't have in the Great Lakes, but...
But that would be one of those cases of going out doing something you love doing.
I'm sorry, going out and what?
Doing something you love doing.
Yeah.
Are there any great sailing voyages that you are dreaming of being able to take?
Oh, wow. Oh, there are probably so many that, it's like the Great Loop, doing the loop. I'd love to do that someday.
Tell us about the loop, because we've had very little explanation of the loop in interviews so far.
Okay, for instance, starting here in Traverse City and going down to Chicago, going down part of the Mississippi and taking the loop down to the Gulf, going down around Florida and back up, and either through the intercoastals or basically through the intercoastals up through the Erie Canal and then back into the Great Lakes and back to Traverse City.
how long would that be?
Oh, it depends. Some people go down and stay down there for years and then finish it later. Some people, go one season and come back the next season. Just depends on how fast or how slow you want to do it.
For you, ideally, how slow would you want to do it?
Depends on so many things. I think I want to take it leisurely. If I find some place I want to stay for a while, stay for a while. If there's an area that I want to sail for a while, sail that area for a while. I also want to do, believe it or not, as many times as I sailed out in Long Beach and the California coast, I'd like to go up into Alaska. I'd like to do the islands up there. I'd like to go to Catalina. I've never even been to Catalina, as close as I've been and seen it. I'd like to do that. I wouldn't mind doing the Honolulu race once, just because my grandfather did the first one.
So your grandfather did the first Honolulu race.
Uh-huh.
So you've got several generations of sailors in your family.
Well, my grandfather that did the Honolulu race was from my mother, and the grandfather that came here from Canada that was a sailor was my father's. So, father. So I get it from both sides of the family.
So it's just like water in your blood.
Mm-hmm. But the thing that's strange is I'm the only one that's a sailor in the family. I have a sister and a brother. And my brother is a stink potter, loves the speed. And my sister is the only one that has a sailboat, and she hardly ever sails it. So
have you ever thought of just moving onto a boat and being done with the land life?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, my daughter and her father had thought about it back when she was little and raising her on the boat until school age. And we just didn't have the finances to do it, but that was a life dream of ours. And hopefully, one of these days I'll get to do that. But right now, it's not in the cards.